So the first of the Indian Air Force's Rafales have finally arrived. They're at their home base Ambala. Well, one of the things that you're going to hear very often is the word game changer. And you're wondering, Arey, what does game changer mean? Does the Indian Air Force not have any modern fighters? Is it only now that the Indian Air Force truly has modern fighter aircraft? Well, first things first, that's not true. The Indian Air Force does have very modern fighter aircraft, but there are some things in the Rafale that truly make it an evolutionary technology and provide capabilities that the Indian Air Force hasn't had before, and certainly hasn't had before to the kind of extent that the Rafale makes possible. Let me list those for you. Number one, most visibly, the weapons. The Indian Rafale comes with two weapons that are truly game changers, not just because of their capabilities, but also because of their range. The first is the Meteor. It's the world's longest range air-to-air missile. It's operational in France, and now it's going to be operational with the Indian Air Force on these Rafales. These are air-to-air missiles that are capable of engaging with air threats a very, very long distance away, over 150 kilometers away. That's a really, really long range. The second weapon system is called the Scalp. This is a stealthy cruise missile, air-to-ground strike weapon that's capable of ranges in excess of 500 kilometers. And when I say stealthy, I mean that it's capable of moving towards its target at pretty low level, evading radar, and therefore the enemy probably won't see it coming. The second game-changing feature on the Rafales are the sensors and electronics on board. For instance, the primary radar is an active electronically scanned array radar, an AESA radar. Now, while some Indian Air Force Jaguars do already have AESA radars, this will be the most modern such sensor on a fighter, and it has many game-changing qualities that it brings to bear for pilots and the mission. So this is by far the most modern air combat sensor the Indian Air Force has ever operated. The third game-changing aspect is electronic warfare. Now, you don't see that very often because it happens in a spectrum that's not visible. Like the name suggests, the ability to conduct warfare in the electronic spectrum is something that is very advanced on the Rafale. Now, there are electronic warfare capabilities with Indian Air Force's existing jets, but the Rafale takes those capabilities entirely to a different level, far beyond what the Indian Air Force is currently used to. The fourth big aspect that makes the Rafale a game changer is its combat radius. This is an aircraft that has an enormous combat load, a large fuel capacity that gives it a large combat radius, which basically means it is effective very, very far from its home base and has effects in terms of both its weapons as well as its range that can take it very, very far away from its home base. For instance, there have been questions about whether this fighter aircraft can be deployed in Ladakh. Now, there are problems with that question because theoretically, yes, it can be deployed in Ladakh because high altitude performance was one of the things that the Indian Air Force required when it bought the Rafale. But having said that, there is no need for the Rafale to be deployed in Ladakh from the Leh Air Base for it to actually be effective in, say, eastern Ladakh, which is where there are tensions happening right now. Because if it takes off from Ambala, very simplistically speaking, it has an impact radius and a combat radius that covers almost 2,000 kilometers in radius, which is, if you draw it on a map, all of eastern Ladakh for certain, many parts of Pakistan, large parts of Tibet, all of Jammu and Kashmir, all of POK and beyond as well. So for an aircraft of this kind, it doesn't need to land and take off from Ladakh to be effective in that area. It's a question that has been doing the rounds, and therefore I wanted to answer that. And the final game-changing aspect, and believe me, this is something that is as crucial as the weaponry, as the sensors, as the electronic systems, as the avionics, etc., is maintainability and availability. Remember, the Indian Air Force has had a nightmare of an experience maintaining aircraft. There has been problems with acquiring spares, especially from certain Russian platforms. But with the Rafale, maintainability, that is the ease of maintenance, the ease of keeping these aircraft ready for their next sortie, shortening the time between missions is something that has been designed into these aircraft, making them highly available at all times. Now, the Indian Air Force will have to do its own traditional jugaad to Indianize the Rafales and make them even more conducive to Indian operations and to make them used to the Indian peculiarities like terrain, geography, temperature, weather, etc., all of those things. But one thing is for sure, the Indian Air Force recognizes the game-changing qualities of the Rafale and is moving at full speed to make the Rafale combat ready.